and get started. Up first, we have Roadmap to Change, Nahide Aydin, Asia Philbin, and Chuck Powell. Nahide Aydin has over 20 years of experience in GIS and currently manages the Geographic Information System and Cartography for Westland's Cultural Resources projects. Her technical experience is concentrated on GIS and databases. She is an expert in several types of cartographic and GIS-based software and field mapping instruments. Asia, which Chuck, I don't see here. Is she coming soon?
No, unfortunately, she won't be able to attend today.
But we're going to go ahead and say her bio because she's part of the group.
Yep, if we can.
Asia Philbin is the Town of Marana Water Department Resources Coordinator, where she has managed water portfolios and helped department implement energy, asset management, and water resource recovery programs since 2014. Prior to Marana Water, she worked as a hydrologist for Tucson Water, where she assisted in the planning, analysis, and tracking of their water resources and energy portfolios for over a dozen years. Asia is active in the American Waterworks Association and AZ Water. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Miami in Marine Science and Geology with a biology major. Chuck Powell has been providing graphics and mapping support on a variety of environmental, cultural, and biological projects and specializes in GIS using ArcGIS and CAD programs since 1993. He is an expert on the most current versions of ArcGIS Desktop, ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Online, Collector, Survey 123, Story Map, Synapse Builder, AutoCAD, which is specifically AutoCAD Civil 3D, and MicroStation V8. He has experience with many more types of data collection instrumentation, including GPS, Total Station, Trimble, GeoUnits, Esri Collector, and Survey 123. He has trained outside staff on the use of Esri desktop and web applications since 2007, and he currently serves as a geo-mentor to 2 schools introducing students to GIS and mapping. That's quite the resume, Chuck. But please take it away. I believe Chuck is presenting and Nahide is going to be taking over. But
okay. Thank you, Jeff, and I apologize for those bios. I got into GIS because I could spell it, so that's how I fell into this group. So let's go ahead and get started. Roadmap. We looked at Marana, Town of Marana's Water Utility Department, existing GIS data, and how they could migrate to Esri's new utility network data model. UDEM, as GIS professionals, we need to put acronyms to everything. So you'll be hearing UDEM quite a bit today. We evaluated the existing GIS metadata and workflows, and our end product was a database schema based on Esri's model with Marana-specific attributes, and provided recommendations to guide future activities associated with transitioning to UDEM. These recommendations included concordance tables for Marana feature classes and their respective utility network data model feature classes. Administrative review of software and recommendations for future state of GIS workflows, standards, and software. For this project, we started with meetings with all the key players within the utility and within the town itself. The town controls the technological services, which controls a lot of the software and hardware that the utility uses. The purpose of these meetings was to observe the current workflows and GIS procedures within and between the multiple divisions within Town of Marana's water department. The meetings were also intended to identify current and future GIS data needs. We met with them. We started talking about what they wanted out of their GIS system, kind of start talking about thinking outside the box. If you could have anything, what would you want? And we started consolidating that information.
Chuck, just one second. Can everybody please mute yourselves? I know some of you are coming on late. But can you make sure to mute yourselves? Okay, go ahead, Chuck.
So we had a series of meetings as whole groups and then individual groups, and reviewed everyone's kind of typical workflow, typical tasks they complete during the days. One of the major investments the town has is Cartograph asset management. The town uses Cartograph across the board, not just in their utility departments. So Public Works, Parks and Recreations, and so forth uses Cartograph. It's kind of entrenched in the town, and we reviewed their current workflows and also Cartograph's migration toward Esri's utility network data model. Also, we reviewed all the Esri apps. So what could the town water use that they're already paying for? You know, collector, field maps, survey 123 is all included in their license agreement with the town. So we looked at could they kind of control their own destiny, set up their own forms, water utility centric, and do some of the workflows that Cartograph does right now that maybe not as efficiently as the water utility wanted. We also looked at Cartograph's new out-of-the-box wastewater treatment plant asset management program, and also how Esri compare. Currently the town is using kind of a custom-made water or wastewater treatment plant asset management with custom features, custom attribute tables that are Cartograph specific, that does not get transported back to the GIS system. Cartograph just released a wastewater treatment plant, so we were trying to compare their features to what Esri has, and Esri is currently not developing a true treatment plant feature class within utility network model. They're calling it inside the fence. They would, their professional services might work with the town to create one, but out of the box utility network data model for water utilities is not there yet. So we looked at those kind of features going back and forth between Cartograph and Esri's utility network data model. We also looked at one of the big things that the whole team wanted was the ability to pull up as-built and other supporting documents for their GIS locations. They wanted, if they were working on a line, they want to be able to instantly pull up the as-built plan for that line, for the field crews, the operators, and so forth. So this was a big part of the assignment. Excuse me. The town has a mandated Laserfish document management system, but some of the staff have worked around a little bit and created their own directories of as-built and so forth. So it's kind of spread across the town. So consolidation was one of our big recommendations. we also looked at Esri's attachments, the capabilities of attaching it directly to the GIS system. Right here is a picture of an attachment viewer within ArcGIS. We looked at performance versus ease of use, and made recommendations based on that. I'm going to hand it over to Nahide right now to actually talk about the utility network data model. I had the privilege of looking at the toys and the cool hardware. Nahide had the privilege of metadata, attribute tables, and all that fun stuff. So Nahide, you can mute yourself or unmute yourself.
Hi there, my name is Nahide Aydin. I've been working with Western Resources for 4.5 years now. One of my main things is data itself. I've been very interested in data, always how to store and manage the data. And currently also managing the Western Resources Archaeological Group's GIS data, and I get them to field, I get them the reports, etc. But this is one of my new passions, let's say, utility network data model. One of the main things about utility network data model is data conservation. But before we go into that, let's look at how the utility network data model works. A utility network as is new data model for managing utility and telecom networks. It is designed to model all of the components that make up a utility system, such as pipes, valves, pressure zones, pumps, circuits, and that allows you to build real-world behavior into the features that we model. We can create and edit features that model edit features that every type of utility equipment, configure how those features in the network are connected, trace how resources such as water, gas, electricity flow through your network, analyze how the network is affected by real-world events such as storms, outages, or equipment failure. There are two types of models, as you see in the slide, for utility network. ArcGIS Enterprise, the multi-user model, and the single-user model, which is based on a file database. The multi-user model based on a multi-user database that can be SQL, Oracle, SAP HANA, PostgreSQL, GRE, any kind of multi-user database, Esri is supporting to STE layers that can be used also for utility network data model. 1. 2, you can interact with that utility network through ArcGIS Enterprise, which is nowadays we know as ArcGIS Portal that your institution has, and your interaction can be through web maps and web apps, mobile applications, just as Chuck just mentioned a couple of them, like Survey 123, Collector, Field Maps, etc., or through your desktop application that is basically mainly ArcGIS Pro. One of the main questions we get always asked is, can you interact with utility network through ArcGIS desktop, mainly ArcMap? You can view your utility network data, but you cannot edit it through ArcGIS desktop, ArcGIS ArcMap. On the single user model, it is based on a file database, and you can only edit your model to ArcGIS Pro in the single user model. But that does not mean that you cannot interact with it through a web map. For most of the cases, Chuck, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the cases you can actually take it offline and bring it back and sync it to back to your file database after you collected data in the field. And again, you can edit and do the analytical capabilities of utility network data models, such as tracings and isolation, inspections and such, through that database model, file database model. Chuck?
Yeah, that is correct. So the single-use model, all the analysis, all the slick utility network tools, the containers, and so forth to edit that has to be done on desktop. And then you can republish the service and the mobile apps and consume them. You can make basic edits, geometry edits, attribute edits to the line or the points, lines, polygons, but all the network domain and network tools will have to be done via desktop. On the enterprise model, that you can do a lot of that. Leak tracing, for instance, can be done on the fly, on the web, or out in the field.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, utility network data model has two networks within that model. One of them is the structure network, as you see the slide in the bottom, and then the domain network at the top. First, I want to talk about the structure network. Structured network is shared amongst all domain network features within the utility network. Features within the structures network do not have any resources such as water or electricity flowing through them, but they serve to support other network features that is flowing through the utility network, through the domain network. For example, a water pump station can contain that are features of a domain network, such as pipes, wet wells, and valves. If you go to the domain network, this network contains the features that delivers the resource. There are 5 types of the features in a domain network. Lines. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. Lines through which a resource flow. Devices that control the flow of that resource. Junctions placed where features are connected. And assemblies representing the collection of lines, junctions, and devices. And there's a subnetwork lines that defines the extent of the resource flow. I would like to also mention the tiers within a domain network. Every domain network is divided into tiers. These can be either partitioned or hierarchical. Partition tiers are generally support systems like electrical and communication utilities, as opposed to hierarchical tiers are generally models, networks that are nested, such as gas and water. Here, I would like to talk about the domain and structure networks that make up the whole of the utility network data model. When you're creating a utility network data model and migrating your current system or creating from scratch GIS system to the utility network data model, you are going to create basic on to an asset package. An asset package is a file geodatabase containing prefigured feature classes, tables, relationship classes, and attachments. On the left-hand side here, you're seeing the domain network feature classes, as you see 5 of them there, and 2 tables, junction object and edge object. And also there are, I'm not able to show you all of those, but there are a number of relationship classes and tables also comes within the utility network asset package.
Excuse me, Nahide?
Yes.
I don't see our third presenter, Mary Darling, for 3D change detection. Is there anyone in the group who's here to speak for Mary Darling? Okay. With that, we're just going to go ahead and give you more time. It looks like you're in the middle of this. Since we had 3 going for 20 minutes, we can obviously go another 10 minutes at least for yours. So
I will wrap it up soon. I'm sorry.
It's back to you.
Thank you. And there is also the structure network. There is again, the junction line and structure line. Let me give a quick example of what asset groups and asset types are. Each feature classes has asset groups and asset types. An asset group is a superset of features in a feature class. Also, we know them as, in Esri lingo, as subsets. For example, in water distribution model, water device feature classes has 20 asset groups, or aka asset subset. Also, within these asset groups, we have asset types to make a minor classification within an asset group. These asset types also are controlled by attribute domains. Now, when we looked at the Marana data, one of the first things in our meetings with Marana Water and the technological services, they asked us what the design of the utility network data model is. So we created two Excel files, one for the water distribution, one for the sewer, and basically for each feature class that the water distribution model has, we created 3 Excel sheets, one for the attribute table design, secondly the asset group, and along with their descriptions and their attribute domain codes, and thirdly the asset types, again with their attribute codes and their description, so that everybody in the group can look at these Excel sheets without having access to any kind of Esri data or knowing how to use it. They can actually understand how the utility network data model is designed. Okay. So also, can we get to the next slide, please? Okay. And here is one of our final analysis for the utility network data model assessment for Marana Water. So on the left-hand side in the Excel sheet, I don't know if you can see it as good as I can, but you see the Marana feature class. Yes? Marana feature class, that is sample locations. And you're seeing the tables with the field names and the aliases, the data type, and everything else. On the right-hand side, you are seeing the corresponding feature class that data is going to go. So by color coding them, on the blue, it is the default value for that asset that is on the left is going to become 4. Asset group is going to be 4, which is the asset group station. And that asset type is going to be sample station, and then there is the attribute domain code there. Couple of other things we did for Marana is we have matched fields. So on the left-hand side, there are Marana specific attributes and also other attributes that can be actually translated to the network's out-of-the-box attribute field. For example, on the left-hand side, we're seeing created user and, created date. And those are actually a little bit different. And anybody who actually copied data from one feature class to another, if you do not match fields somehow, then you are going to have problem carrying the attribute data, the table data, into the next feature class that you are copying into. So one of the things that we did was field matching. And also we included Marana specific attributes in that there, if you could not find a field that is in the utility network model that can actually represent the data that Marana had. One of the other advantages of doing it in such a corresponding table is when you are doing, you are creating your own utility network data model. One of the things that happens is you are using a tool called that is provided by Esri, Stage Data Loading Workspace, which is based, it's all attribute field matching on Excel sheets. So one of the things you can do is you can use this Excel sheet and do your field matching, opening this one in one and the data, using the data loading workspace Excel sheets and matching them together. on the other screen or something like that. That's one of the reasons why we work that way. Chuck, anything else you want to add?
No. I think the nice thing with the Excel spreadsheets where we could share that data and share that with non-GIS professionals within the utility department. So it was a nice way to communicate across the board.
That's true. That's true. Okay, and we would like to throw out some of our recommendations, and these are generally works in a lot of utility companies. And CAD data integration was one of our biggest questions, especially for Marana, like how we can make it more efficient and such. And we had some recommendations about that, like building a CAD block library and developing CAD standards. Field data QA/QC is one of my pet peeves because when I started, I worked in the field, and I know how it is important that when you're bringing data from the field, it needs to be integrated properly back into the system in a very cleaner way. So you need to check your field data before it gets back into your system. And if you ever want to do something like that, like, migrating from any kind of model to, from any kind of system to another, from a data point, data hygiene and data conservation is very important. You need to clean up your data, make sure everything is in order, and then also you can eliminate a lot of, I don't want to say noise, but, duplications and, redundancy in the data by data conservation. One of the last things I would like to mention is attribute rules. Attribute rules is Esri's new thing based on archaic language. It was known as attribute assistant back in ArcMap and has been used, as far as I can see, in a lot of utility GIS systems. And you can use attribute rules for your data hygiene and by using as constraints or triggers and such, and it will actually help you to keep your data clean and in orderly fashion. And that's pretty much what I have. Chuck?
No, that pretty much covers it. I apologize, we went a little over, but thank you.
Thank you.
Nahide and Chuck, thank you for your presentation. I'm not currently seeing any questions in the chat window. If anybody has any, we still have a minute and a half. We at Valley Metro have been looking at enterprise asset management. I wonder if there's anything different. I don't remember seeing a remote data gathering piece, but it seems like water, wastewater might have some special needs for security out there. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So a lot of these tools can be just deployed behind the firewall, and I think that's where they mainly use Cartograph for that those mobile applications for their asset management, their data collection. Also, we didn't talk about the wants and needs to connect to SCADA equipment, live data streaming to their GIS maps as well. So that's in the future.
Thank you. Certainly a lot to it. Okay, I still, unless I missed anybody's questions, please re-enter it and let me know. We'll get back to you. Let's move on. We now have GIS in today's and tomorrow's PSAP with John Joseph. Mr. John Joseph, public safety GIS expert with Datamark, the public safety team of Michael Baker International, has been a member of the GIS community for over 22 years. He has a history of work that extends across multiple industries and specialty fields related to both the commercial and public safety sectors. In addition to his experience in GIS, John became a NENA certified E&P or emergency number professional in 2016. John is also a commercial advisory member for his NENA chapter in Idaho. His unique understanding of GIS and public safety provides him a great deal of insight when it comes to how these two worlds can coexist and collaborate in an NG 911 environment. John, I guess I need to move it to you.
Yeah, I was going to say, you pretty much covered everything. I'm good to go.
Yeah.
All right, let me see if I can share my screen. It's not giving me the option.
I just changed it. Sorry.
There we go. And I want to do screen 3. All right, looks like everybody can see what I got here on the screen.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Let's see if we can get this thing to work. There we go. So, yeah, like I said, I think you kind of covered all of my initial introductions here as far as my presentation. You know, I originally was scheduled to be here for today's presentation and be doing this alongside Sandy Dyre. Unfortunately, she got called away and was scheduled into another meeting. So, you know, I'm not nearly as good looking, but we'll see how far we get in this presentation today. I'm really happy to be back at ASIC. I've actually presented here in the past, and you guys are always a great audience. And so thank you so much for just having me, and I appreciate it. You know, as I said, you kind of went through my introduction and kind of who I am, but, you know, if anybody has questions that they want to ask about Idaho or elk hunting, feel free to give me a call. You know, I actually wanted to start off by showing you this quote, and you know, it was something that to me really hit home. A colleague of mine had actually highlighted this quote in the presentation recently, and I loved it. It was, you know, one of those things that really speaks volumes about, you know, GIS, especially in the public safety industry, and that is that, you know, GIS is a sleeping giant. The day has come to awaken the sleeping giant and unleash its phenomenal power in that process, or that it possesses in a way to enhance public safety. And then I realized when I started looking at it and started looking at the fine print as to where this came from, what book it was from, that this was a quote from 2009. And I suddenly didn't feel as excited because, gosh, it's been since 2009 we've been talking about this. And of course, you know, are we any closer than we were in 2009? This is a quote from basically over a decade ago. So, you know, I kind of started thinking about that and started, you know, kind of looking back on my own career. You know, I've been doing this for a really long time, and you know, 20 years seems like a blink of an eye to me anymore. And you know, what I've seen in NG911, you know, really over, you know, nearly a quarter of a century, has been this expanse of its roles and responsibilities. So that's what I'm kind of here to talk to you about today. You know, when I think about GIS and public safety, I always think back to some of these old TV shows you used to see where they have the pin on the wall, you know, or the pin map on the wall, and they were trying to identify the location of where the criminals were, where the cat burglar was at. And of course, you know, they had the big circle around the area where the cat burglar lived, and you know, he's hit all the fancy apartment buildings and banks and whatever. And they're trying to go through and find him using a map, right? And I think the GIS is really evolving for public safety in a much faster way than most of us even realize. And it really hinges on these three elements, right? It's no longer about comp stats and crime analysis and patrol zones. What really changed is this idea of technology and connectivity, that we can build applications today that are faster, smarter, easier to use. And of course, you know, that we have the communication infrastructure to be able to deliver this content through services and other things, where information is literally just flying at these officers nowadays and to the dispatchers in ways we haven't really thought about in the past. I think the other thing is the idea of community demand. What I mean by the community demand is that I think we've all heard the message before where they say, well, why is the pizza guy or my Uber driver can find me, but 911 can't? That's not lost on this community, right? We understand, you know, all the components are there. Why are we not doing this? And of course, the last part is the situational awareness. Within the industry of public safety today, at no other time in the history of man has there been more of a demand for situational awareness. I'm not talking about traffic cameras and speed limit zones and so forth. I'm talking about everything from our cell phones to our internet searches. We are being monitored all the time, and the infrastructure that's behind that is there to support us when it comes to the critical infrastructure of this country. And so why has 911 been delayed in moving to an NG911 environment? When we think about the current state of today's 911 environment, we have to understand is that a lot of this is, really based around the investment that can be made at a local level, right? There are no major federal investments in 911 that happened in recent years. The idea that we're relying on surcharge dollars to pay for 911 services, in most cases, those aren't even hardly enough. There's hardly enough revenue being generated from surcharge revenues to even pay for the people in the PSAP or the technology that sits in their back row, right? We're having to then expand that out to rely on tax revenue from property and other things to supplement the 911 departments. So we don't really have the investment we need to have. And of course, routing 911 calls for the longest time has really been kind of a tabular-driven environment, which has been forced through the telecommunications networks for alleys and MSAGs and that sort of thing. And GIS hasn't been a really high priority. It's been a nice to have. It's something that a lot of agencies want to have. They want to know where their address points, their center lines, their boundaries are. But it goes into other systems outside of 911. It goes into their CAD system. It goes into their AVL environment. Well, that's all changing, and it's happening really fast. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. So when we think about the importance or the significance of how this is happening today and how this future state of NG911 is going to impact us, we have to understand that we are completely redesigning the 911 system. We're shifting the responsibility away from the telecommunications companies to be the ones as our authoritative source for address locations and giving that to the GIS authorities at a local level. In addition to that, we also have this new infrastructure, what we call the I3 architecture, that we're using to enhance the flexibility, the resiliency, the survivability of a 911 system. The level of cybersecurity that's behind this future NG911 state is critically important because we are literally aggregating data and reconcile GIS data across 20,000 municipalities, states, and regions across the country, right? So it's a very important thing, and it's kind of happening piece by piece. I was trying to pull up an accurate account for you as to the number of states that actually made this transition already. And it's moving too fast to keep track of. I was looking through a report that was from 2018, and just looking at the report, I could already tell you there's about 5 states that have already gone ahead and made this transition here within just the last 2 years. So there's a lot of things that are happening very quickly and very rapidly. And I think that's important to understand that this future state of NG911 isn't something that's a someday thing. It's happening right now. And you all are actually going to play an incredibly important part in making that happen. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is when I say that GIS is going to become a stakeholder, right? This really is about kind of the development of this community that's going to be there to support 911. The 911 authority, of course, is responsible for the answering of the calls and the processing of technology, but there are addressing authorities at a local level. And there are GIS data providers that are going to be maintaining this data integrity at a local level. And there's going to have to be this cross-jurisdictional collaboration between neighbors because you have to be able to align your boundaries so there aren't any gaps or overlaps and that sort of thing. And why is that important? Well, because if you fall into any one of these categories, guess what? You're already a stakeholder in the public safety community. So hopefully that hasn't freaked anybody out in the GIS community, but it's true. You already are. You're already part of this solution. It's just a matter of helping us get there. So as a part of this, what I wanted to do is I wanted to walk you through kind of the 10 steps to NG911 Js Readiness. and just shortly kind of walk you through kind of what we identified as being the 10 most important aspects of making this transition. I think it all starts with having a conversation with your stakeholders, the 911 authorities, those addressing authorities, your neighbors. And I think education is incredibly important. It's key to this discussion. Schedule a meeting and just get the ball rolling in the right direction to understand what the requirements are at your own local level around how you're going to support NG 911. I know there's a lot of folks out there in the industry that think, well, this is something that's going to happen at a state level. That's true. It is probably going to happen at a statewide level or at a very large regional level. But most of the time, what we come to find out is the workflow and the data supply chain starts at a local level first. There are always going to be these rolling updates that are going to have to happen throughout the organization, so that as a local community is adding a subdivision, they're creating new address points. Well, then that has to get rolled up to the county, and that has to make sure that that integrates with their system. So scheduling these meetings and starting those discussions are incredibly important. Educate yourself. Educating yourself is crucial because, unfortunately, these are ever-changing rules and responsibilities are tied into these. So stay involved in webinars, workshops. Try and participate possibly in some of the NENA working groups where they're talking about the data standards and things that are like that going on in NG 911. I think the next thing is to start development of your plan. And this will be important at the end of the presentation. I'll explain why. But keep it simple. Understand what are the 4 key components that I'm really going to need to focus on with my data. My street center line data, my boundary, my address, my point locations, and so forth, my street center lines. And start going through and looking at that development of that plan. Keep it simple, set your path, and start to kind of evaluate those. The next thing you want to do is you want to assess the current state of the GIS data you have that's going to be responsible for maintaining an NG 911 environment. This will be important because as you assess this data, we can begin to make recommendations to the decision makers as to where we're having problems with our data. Where does it fall off? A lot of folks within the 911 industry will tell you that they are really not relying on their MSAG anymore because they don't trust it. But it is a measuring stick for us to evaluate our GIS data against, as well as the ALI database. So start to look at how you can start to run those validations and start to check the accuracy of your current state of data. Next is really look for where you need to add resources. Now, those resources could be coming from other departments or other agencies. They could be coming from outside source. But potentially, depending on how much work needs to be done, you may need to have a little bit of a forklift in order to bring your data in alignment with where it needs to be. This sometimes is because you might have great address points, but unfortunately you don't have good community names. And so it's going to take a lot of work to try and get all of those different community names aligned, or you don't have good zip codes, or for some reason there's no range parity inside your street center lines. These are all places where you can start to look for additional resources to bring in to help you with that. The other part is you need to acquire the data that you don't have. It's surprising how often we might find that there's data that we just that hasn't been shared with us. Maybe it's a matter of incorporated city within a county that hasn't shared their data recently. Go out and make sure we've got the most recent version of that content. Another thing is to consider your data quality. And what I mean by considering your data quality, we actually break it down into these kind of 5 elements. The availability, what's that? Let's close that again. Okay. Consider the data availability. The availability is how frequently can I get this data, right? We talk about completeness. Is it complete? Is it being delivered in, as a complete data set or in a semi-haphazard way, where I'm only getting part of the city's data set, or I'm not getting all of an outside jurisdictional data set? I want to make sure I'm getting it in a fairly accurate fashion. Of course, accuracy is very key, right? Is it accurate data? Am I getting data that's been created based on the same projections that I use, or do I have to go through and modify that every time it's coming in? Is it missing data inside the tables and so forth? So it's really important that my attributes are accurate and consistent from time to time. Consistency, are there schema issues that impact how my data is going to be, me bringing in that data? If I'm at a county level and every time I get the copy of the data, it's been changed, that means I've got to go through and remap that data every single time. So I think that, the untimeliness, I'm sorry, I missed timeliness. Timeliness is that how regularly can I get these updates, right? Is this something where I'm only allowed to request this data from them, once every 3 months or once a year? We definitely want to make sure we can get this data on a regular basis. And what does that mean? Well, that means we need to work towards development of agreements in certain cases. We need to have an MOU or a memorandum of understanding. And there's some great places out there where you can find on the internet some documentation around the memorandums of understanding that other stakeholders have issued with one another to be able to help them communicate the sharing of data from one piece app to the next. And of course, the last piece, and this is one of those things I think most people don't really think about until they've started the process, and it is that this is a rinse, wash, and repeat type process. This is not a come in, we're going to do it once, and the effort is completed. It's an iterative process that will slowly get better. Somebody once sat there and said that the development of GIS for NG911 is a race. It's not a marathon, right? And what he meant by that is that you get in this big hurry to try and develop the quality of your data quickly. What you'll find is that as you get closer to the finish line, the steps you have to go through become smaller and smaller and smaller, right? What he meant by that was there's less work involved as we get closer to our 100% level of accuracy. In fact, eventually this becomes something that will just become second nature as we work through our data. But now, at this point, is where it becomes extremely challenging because we, of course, have to consistently run back through this process over and over and over again. So the further down the path we go, the less steps we're going to need to take, the easier it's going to become to manage. It becomes a much more reasonable process for us to incorporate into what we do every day. But initially, it's a big step in the right direction. So final thoughts. Collaboration is really important. And remember that you're not alone. You have people within your jurisdictions, within your counties and your communities and your state that you can work with to help make this happen, as well as vendors like myself. Data is not developed in a vacuum. If you are a county, you're not the only person developing data in your county. Don't forget that. Education. NG911 standards are evolving and changing and improving over time. So make sure you stay involved in the NIDA environment and stay involved with what's happening on those standards. And of course, advocacy. You have to remember that when it comes to GIS, it is the life's blood of an NG911 system. And in that sense, you are the greatest advocate or spokesman for your agency when it comes to talking about the importance of GIS and NG911. What you do today to improve the GIS data quality and accuracy is going to obviously serve huge benefits to public safety in the future, but it does it right now today, because what you do to improve that data is going to be something that can be implemented and put into that CAD system, into that AVL system, into their call handling system. So remember that improvements you make today are obviously going to be tied back to immediate improvements in their response paths, all those sorts of things. It immediately improves the quality of public safety. Of course, local GIS authorities will play a vital role in the implementation of this, because NG911 really starts with you. So the last piece, and I mentioned this briefly, is talking about planning. And we want to make sure that you knew that we've been pushing out this regular webinar series. We'd like to invite everybody here that came to today's presentation to attend. We'll be holding that on November the 17th at 11 a.m. I believe Sandy Dyre is going to be doing that presentation. So we hope that you guys can join us there as well. Of course, my name is John Joseph. There's my contact information. If you have any questions, let's go ahead and open up the phone and see what folks have to say.
John, I'm not seeing too many questions as of yet. We do have somebody with a comment that I'd like to turn into a question.
Okay.
If you have agencies that, well, they have data that you know would benefit NextGen 911, but for whatever reason they're unwilling to share their data, are there any avenues that you can follow to try to get them on board with you know what the purpose behind 911 and all of that?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question, number one, and very well worded, by the way. You know, I think that it's critical to understand the justification as to why. I know that I have run across this in the past, particularly as it relates to sovereign nations, right? Because in a lot of cases, they themselves have their own jurisdictional authority over public safety. Now, that being said, there are also many times kind of existing MOUs that are in place. So you may be required to kind of look towards your own organization and look at any existing MOUs that might be in place where you can point to this as being the beneficial aspect of why collecting their data for your NG91 environment is important, because you are required to provide them with mutual aid and joint response in certain scenarios, whether that be for fire, medical, and other things. So that would be maybe the direction I would look at, is, you know, trying to identify where there might be justification for an existing, you know, kind of MOU, MOA type of environment. Does that answer that question for you?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm not seeing any more questions. So, John, I want to thank you for your presentation. That was great. And I think still don't see anyone for Mary, and we're running out of time. So that's going to close up the session. After this, we'd appreciate it if anybody has time to go take the survey. It's next to the button that you clicked on to get in here, and to try to visit the sponsor, the Premium Plus sponsors in their breakout sessions. That's coming up. Next, I think we have the Tuesday Networking Lunch Lounge. So if you have time, it starts at noon, which is 7 minutes away, and you get to connect with your peers in the lunch lounge. Outside of that, not seeing any other questions. I want to thank you all, and that you have 7 minutes of time back. Thank you to all of our presenters once again.
Thank you, Jeff.